Hi, everybody. Wow, user-generated content. The phrase that can strike fear into the hearts of IP owners worldwide. Certainly, when people talk about 3D printing, they often talk about the potential for intellectual property infringement through the production of user-generated content using 3D technologies. What we'd like to talk about is the opportunity for creating businesses using 3D printing around user-generated content. My name is Scott. I'm co-founder of a licensing startup called Source3. This is Kerry, who runs business development at Whiteclouds, manufacturing, printing.
Service provider.
Right. And together we're going to try to look at the business that YouTube created around user-generated content and see what we can learn and what we can apply to the growth of the 3D printing industry. Prior to co-founding Source3 about a year ago, I was the head of music publisher partnerships at YouTube. My job was to introduce the YouTube platform and the concept of a user-generated video to the music industry and convince the music industry to license their content to YouTube users and to the YouTube platform. YouTube is, in my opinion, the purest expression of user-generated content, and we'll talk about why that is. IP holders give up a lot of control about what happens with their intellectual property on YouTube in order to take advantage of monetization. So I think there's a lot we can learn. I'm relatively new to the 3D printing industry. We started our company about a year ago after spending several years at Google and YouTube. So I'm going to talk about a lot of the concepts. Kerry is here from the 3D printing industry to really kind of keep us grounded in reality and mostly dash all of my dreams, I think, as we look at the lofty goals of creating really an insanely powerful user-generated content business. I mean, I was attracted to 3D printing, probably like many of you, because I think it's the clearest opportunity to deliver the perfect product to the right person at the perfect time, and I think user-generated content is going to meet a lot of that demand. So when our music licensing company was acquired by Google in 2011 to become back-end licensing operations for YouTube, YouTube was not popular with the music industry. YouTube was still viewed by big segments of the music industry as pirates and copyright infringers. When I gave my first talk to the music industry trying to introduce the concept of YouTube, grown men in suits literally threw stuff at me. That's how unpopular YouTube was in certain segments of the industry. Fast forward 3 years, we licensed the vast majority of recorded music around the world, and music owners were competing to get YouTube users to use their songs in those user videos rather than their competitors' songs. And so what happened to change that is a combination of systems that YouTube built, as well as changing brand preferences and changing brand perspectives towards technology over those 3 years. And I think the systems and the changing brand perspectives could apply equally to a developing user-generated business in 3D printing. So why do we even care about user-generated content? I thought it'd take just a couple seconds to talk about that. And for our part, it's because we believe that the confluence of a number of different developing technologies in this space are going to make it very easy for users and consumers to create their own versions of some of their favorite products. We're talking about consumer products here. We'll set aside, for the moment, industrial products. I think there's a whole lot of different challenges. We probably don't want users making engines for cars and things like that. So we're talking about kind of consumer products. Right now, a lot of collectibles, maybe life hacks, things like that, but we're all probably dedicating our day to this topic today because we believe that the products that can be created for consumers in the future are going to grow and grow. But the democratization of capture, software, access to amazing printing technologies, and education, we think will create an environment where people can make their own versions of some of their favorite products And we as an industry, as well as the brand world and the intellectual property world, are going to have to face this question. You know, do we go the way of Napster and lots of infringement litigation, or is there a way to construct business? And I think looking at something like YouTube can help us guide the way for developing business rather than a decade of frustration and litigation. Let's define user-generated content very quickly. For our part, user-generated content is content that's created by users without a business relationship to an IP holder. So this isn't, I know somebody at Disney and I have got the rights from Disney to create a video or a product using Disney IP. It is I just went and did it. And then the other aspect of user-generated content is distribution to others. So we're not talking about personal use or private use. In the concept of YouTube, this is a user putting a video up on YouTube without a relationship with the content industry and making that video available for everybody to see, not just posting a private video. And then, you know, so we've established, I think, that we think that user-generated content will be created in the 3D industry, and why should brands care? And when I do a slightly different version of this talk with the brand world, and it's because user-generated content scales product development in a lot of really exciting ways. You certainly, if you put your users and your fans to work for you, you can create more products. YouTube is an example. There are approximately 8,000 companies worldwide that have licensed their intellectual property for use on YouTube. And of those 8,000 companies are monetizing over 400 million videos. So that's on an average something like 50,000 videos per company. There's no way that Beyonce can make 50,000 videos. It's just not possible. If you leverage your fans, you can create more products. There's also a lot of studies that indicate that user products are actually better. There's a really interesting one about the Japanese company Muji, who did a study and compared their designer products versus their user-generated products and found that their user products were 3 times more profitable, had 4 times more gross margin, and those numbers increased year over year during the course of a 3-year study. There's been a lot of studies investigating how consumers in the US and the UK and Japan tinker with household products, and they came up with the idea that 5% of people in the United States will actually tweak their household products to make them better. So if you can leverage that kind of maker and tinkerer mentality, you can start creating more and better products. Your marketing department will tell you that interactivity builds brand loyalty, and also, frankly, it's inevitable. I mean, we know that if you develop a technology, consumers will do things with it. I mean, history has shown us through Napster and YouTube. Cafe Press is another example. I think 3D printing will be another very, very salient example. It's not particularly persuasive to talk to the brand world saying you need to embrace this because it's inevitable and it's going to happen. But there really is some truth to that. So let's take a quick minute and talk about the components of what YouTube did. How does YouTube work? And then we'll spend some time trying to apply it to our 3D printing industry. At a very high level, these are the components that I think we can break down a YouTube's successful user-generated business down to. Creators, a platform license, a mechanism of attributing a product, a video, to a rights holder, monetization, earning the money, and then making royalty payments. So let's go through each. So in the creators, there's 2 types of creators on YouTube. There are partners. This is kind of the content industry. These are entities that make an agreement with YouTube, create a channel, and upload their own content. So this is like a Disney channel where Disney uploads a trailer to a movie. Universal Records will upload the Beyonce video. Or Major League Baseball will upload highlights for baseball games. The other creators on YouTube are users, garden variety folks like us. They don't have any relationship with YouTube. They just create content and post them. And what's interesting about YouTube, which I think will apply to 3D, is that both professional content and user content exist side by side, and consumers kind of toggle back and forth and choose what they want to consume. One of the keys to how YouTube works is the fact that YouTube developed a platform license. So this is what the business relationship looks like. Essentially, if you're an IP rights holder, you give YouTube a license to allow YouTube's users to create their own videos, including third-party IP that they don't own. And the IP owner will tell YouTube it's okay for those videos to stay on YouTube so long as those videos comply with community guidelines, meaning there's some basic assurance that the videos are decent, and there's not naked children, and there's not hate speech and things like that. Once there's an assurance that the video is basically decent, YouTube promises to monetize that video, and we'll talk about how they do that, and then YouTube promises to share the revenue that they earn from the fact that those videos exist. Now, an IP owner, whether it's Disney or a record label or a sports league, they can always block certain assets from existing on YouTube. But for the most part, when they sign a license and agree that these videos, user videos, can exist, they really cede most control over what happens with their IP. So they don't get to approve a video before it exists on YouTube. They have very limited options to take a video down that's silly or they don't really like. And they have some control over the type of advertising that is placed around videos, and we'll get to that in a second. But for the most part, content industry agrees that videos can exist on YouTube carte blanche. That's really aggressive, and I don't think we can get quite there in 3D printing, but we can see how close. So the genius of YouTube is if you've ever uploaded a video, it doesn't go live right away. And what is happening is YouTube is comparing that video, it's scanning that video and comparing the video to its storehouse of reference files of intellectual property, songs, movies, sports highlights. And what YouTube can do is identify intellectual property in every single video. It then turns around into its systems and says, I have identified this song in this video. Do I have a license for that song? If so, then YouTube will do one of three things depending on what the IP owner told YouTube to do. YouTube will either monetize the video, YouTube will block the video if it's something that the IP owner doesn't want on YouTube, or there's this other option called track, which basically means leave the video up and just watch what happens. So once YouTube, through its attribution content ID system, identifies content in a video, knows that that content is licensed, YouTube will monetize by placing ads. And so if you look at the slide, there's an ad on the top right, the red arrow. There's an ad that's a little overlay ad in the video window. And if you watch YouTube, you know that there's pre-roll. There's lots of different types of ads. And essentially what YouTube does is makes money selling these ads and then splits it with the IP rights holder. So one thing that's really interesting is that when I was first negotiating a lot of these licenses, artists and brands weren't comfortable with advertising being placed around their IP. They were afraid that consumers would assign some association between the content of the advertisement and the content of the video. And it was very difficult for some to overcome. Like, if you know, like Bob Seger. Bob Seger has done one advertising license, Chevy Like a Rock. Maybe you've seen it if you watch sports. It'd be really weird in Bob Seger's mind for there to be a Ford advertisement next to one of Bob Seger's videos. And so the brand world and the IP world had to really overcome that in order to license YouTube. And they did over time. It's an example of shifting brand perspectives. They realized that consumers don't associate the content of a banner ad with what's being played in the video. And that was very important. Okay, and then the last component is royalty disbursement. YouTube works very, very hard to pay royalties in an accurate and timely and transparent way, and provides lots and lots of data and information to the IP world about what assets of theirs are being used on YouTube, when, and how much money was made. There can be lots and lots of different pieces of intellectual property in each video, so YouTube has very robust systems to pay N number of licensors per video. The one thing that's really interesting about YouTube, and some of this may have changed since I was there, it's been a year, but YouTube really didn't have a way to pay a user uploader. So in general, if you film your amazing ski weekend and put your favorite song behind it and upload it to YouTube, YouTube monetizes that video. The revenue is split between YouTube and the song owner. The creator doesn't make any revenue. There's certain exceptions, but by and large, that's the case. And so I think that's something that we as the 3D industry should think about. What are the right ways to incentivize creators to create 3D printable products? I think we need to cut them in on the revenue. The fact that there was no ability to make money as a creator on YouTube in that way led to some very strange workarounds that caused some real conflict between YouTube and the content industry. And I think as a 3D printing industry, we should try to avoid those types of things. Okay, so here's the quick summary. These are the components of what YouTube has created in order to build a massive and incredible user-generated business. There are something like 400 hours of video uploaded every minute. The last public number that YouTube released was they scanned something like 100 years of video every day, and that was a number that was released several years ago. So this is a massive, massive operation. How can we take some of these components and apply them to a successful business to allow users to make authorized versions of their favorite products in 3D? So let's look at each. Creators, we probably don't need to go into this. There's a lot of people creating a lot of things. The volume that passes through Whiteclouds is incredible. This is an adorable picture of a bunch of kids who were assigned the project of creating 3D printed toys for their neighbors. And every single toy that they created is either Frozen or Angry Birds or Star Wars. So this is the first slide that I present when I talk to brands. What is a license going to look like? YouTube has this platform license with really broad rights. It says that once your content is on the platform, it doesn't matter if someone's singing a horrible cover version of your song. It doesn't matter if someone is using clips of your movie and making fun of it. It can't come down. It stays on the platform. There's no approval rights. How close to that can we get with 3D? Based on our experience over the last year, I think that a license for user-generated content in 3D is going to start far narrower. It's not like you're going to get rights from Garfield to make green Garfields. Right? Garfield has to be orange in the brand's mind. And so I think rights will be very, very well defined at the beginning. They will track very closely to brand and IP owner style guides. But I think they can broaden over time as the brands get comfortable with the quality of user-generated content. One big thing that is going to be different is licensors are used to approving products before they reach the market. And so one thing that we're all going to have to do is figure out how to incorporate approval mechanisms for the mass production of user-generated content. I don't know if you have any thoughts on how somebody like that could, because if you get a license to create a product, the brand is going to want to, whether it's my company creating it or whether it's a bunch of users that have the ability to create products from a brand's going to want to try to approve the design and maybe even prove the final product.
Right. And in our case, Whiteclouds is a 3D printing service provider. We're 3 years old, and I'll just do that quick spiel. We've grown to the point where we're the largest powder printing service bureau in the world. We get files sent to us every day that somebody wants something printed, and a lot of times we have to stop and say, okay, do they have the rights to print this or do they not have the rights? And it's in our user agreement that we do question that. So yeah, there's got to be some way to patrol that, some way to have a gatekeeper, I guess you'd say, in that.
Yeah, and we'd have to, in order to create products quickly, get approvals quickly, you have to scale and be ready to move.
Right.
I mean, approval is going to be a challenge for user-generated content, and YouTube got away. YouTube, because of its scale, was able to remove approval from its license. And the other thing I think we really need to do is establish ways for the creators to be compensated for the works they do. Now, yes, if I created a 3D printed figurine, and yes, I started with Spider-Man, but it is my version of Spider-Man, I think that as an industry, the best way to align everybody's incentives across the board is to ensure that a royalty is available for the creator as well as for the original IP owner. Reasonable minds could disagree, but I think that's where it goes. Attribution. Attribution is going to be another difficult challenge for 3D. I mean, YouTube has its silver bullet, this amazing content ID system. They scan every single video, compare it to reference files. But I do think that there are technologies that are developing, and a combination of these different technologies could allow a platform to look at a product that's been created by a user and say that is Spider-Man. Either by having the user identify what kind of IP they used in their product, that's kind of the Cafe Press model. Image recognition is very good, it's commoditized. Lots of companies are working on 3D shape recognition, much bigger challenge, but those technologies are developing. There's also all of these licensing technologies. There's lots of buzz about blockchain and DRM and different types of ways to wrap digital files with information so that we can attribute derivative products back to the provenance of one basic existing piece of IP, like a Spider-Man property. And you can also, what we do as a company is we develop these kind of closed systems. If you have a platform that is licensed, you have a certain number of designers working it, you work with one type of fulfillment engine, and you can control where the products go, so you always kind of know what IP is being used where. But attribution, identifying, taking a product and identifying what's in it and attributing that to a license is going to be a key component of this. And this is really where you come in, monetization. So the monetization vehicle on YouTube is putting advertisements around ads. YouTube's now sells subscriptions. In 3D printing, I think for user-generated content, the principal mode of monetization is going to be users creating and selling 3D printed products. And in order to do that, we need companies like Whiteclouds that can make lots of different things.
Right, right. And that's where we come in. We're the service provider. We're able to print in many different materials, different file types and whatnot. I do find it interesting, and I mentioned this to Scott this morning. This is our third year being at CES. We're a 3-year-old company, a startup, and 3 years ago, I believe there were 27 booths in the 3D printing zone. Last year, about double that, and this year there's, I think, close to 75. So you can see the industry's growing. The interesting thing is you walk around and notice there are a lot of consumer printer companies now, which is great because the big companies, the 3D Systems, the Stratasys, are kind of moving away from it, but that doesn't mean it's not popular. So people are going to be creating, they're going to be printing, but the home printer is probably not going to print a Spider-Man or a Stormtrooper or something that they can sell, and that's where you're going to have to go to the professional printer, the production grade printer to get that done. That's where we come in.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a challenge with developing user-generated products that get dispersed into home printers because it's very difficult to track what is done. There's certain attribution technologies that can do this, but it's much more difficult to track and report backwards to your brand partners what is going on in a home printer. I think it's much more likely for this industry to start heading in a user-generated direction to license platforms and work in controlled environments by sending scalable signals to a company via APIs who know how to print on demand, ship, and pack, and then can report back the usage information so that royalties can be paid accurately. And the last one is royalty systems. YouTube's got this massive, robust royalty engine that can pay n number of users per video. In 3D printing, those systems are going to need to be developed. I mean, it's not the sexiest part of running a platform, but those businesses are, those systems are needed. They're going to need to pay multiple licensors. They're going to need to report accurately and transparently where IP has been used. And to the extent that you can add more analytics about who cares about certain types of designs, that information is really valuable to the content industry. When YouTube started reporting information to its IP partners, those partners said, give us all data. Just give us every bit of information you have. We'll take it. As YouTube grew in scale, there was just too much information. With a billion users every month, 400 million videos monetizing, it was just too much. So YouTube had to start aggregating and packaging the data in ways that were much, much easier to interpret. And so to the extent that we as an industry can start doing that, delivering analytics, we can start to coax the brand world and the IP world into the comfort zone and allowing and enabling user-generated content. So our takeaways from looking at how YouTube very successfully created this very pure, beautiful, in my opinion, user-generated business, I think it's a combination of a couple things. Number one is brand perceptions of technology do evolve over time. I mean, you know, the industry got comfortable with the fact that people might be singing horrible versions of their songs, and got comfortable with the fact that it doesn't necessarily a negative reflection on the artist or a negative reflection on the song itself. The industry got comfortable with advertising being around the videos, and got comfortable with the fact that consumers didn't associate the content of the advertising with the content of the video. Those things, I think, can apply equally to 3D. I think over time, it can be clear that consumers understand that this is my version of Spider-Man as opposed to Disney's official version of Spider-Man. We'll see. But it seems like we have pretty good evidence that the IP world can get comfortable with technology and with different, and can get comfortable marketing their own versions and get comfortable allowing users to create monetizable and royalty-bearing versions that are slightly different. Systems are huge. Very, very important to develop coherent royalty systems, to provide data back to your IP partners, to have an attribution engine that can reliably find IP in products that are created. I think the creators should earn revenues too. Again, that's something that's probably subject to debate, but based on what happened on YouTube, although we didn't go too much into it, if you can align the incentives of the users with the incentives of the IP holders, you can create and scale a lot more content. And then, you know, if you're talking about YouTube, you really have to acknowledge that the massive size of YouTube and the massive revenue opportunity drove a lot of why that business was successful. We don't have that kind of consumer scale in this industry, so it's incumbent upon all of us to continue to do what we do, to build tools to make it so that people can create cooler and cooler things and get those into the market. And I think if we do that successfully, we build the systems that the IP world wants to see, and we start monetizing the massive creative potential that these technologies produce, then I think we can duplicate on a broader scale, not just videos, virtually any product, a very, very profitable user-generated ecosystem. But thanks very much for your time.